Hi, I'm a Community History Officer in the History team at the Inner West Library Service. Today I'll be giving a demonstration into how to research your house, as well as how to use the Archives section of the Inner West Library's catalogue. In particular, we'll be looking at the Marrickville Council archives that are in the catalogue. Following this demonstration, you'll know how to access the information and a bit of information about the key records within this series. You'll be able to use the resources while doing your research into a building or house within this former area. Throughout this presentation, we will follow a couple of house examples with at the end a walkthrough of the library website where you can access all these archive documents. When conducting a house history, there is an array of information you can find out. The age of your house, which also tells us the makeup of the suburb, how it developed, and who lived there. The name of your house. As prior to 1915, houses were identified without a numbering system, and this is how we can find the property in the documents. Many of these names also carry meaning, from these early owners, from the suburbs they lived overseas, to even surnames. If there is a photo of your house. We have a collection of digitised and searchable photographs in our photo collection, as well as a selection of street and house images. But not every area is recorded, seeing it is built on donations and contributions from local associations, residents and researchers, and we are always looking to add more to our collection. House plans can also be available for various suburbs. The plans and maps that are available include subdivision plans, waterboard plans. In order to start this process, a good starting point of any history is talking or finding out any information from your neighbours who have lived there a long time on the street, as well as previous owners of the property. These are the most commonly used documents available for house histories. This is the general information that can be found in these records, including these street names, written horizontally or vertically on the left-hand side of the page, the name of the estate, section number and lot number. Street numbers, as some of these early books do not record street numbers. The name of the owners and their occupation, sometimes crossed out when new owners are recorded. The names of tenants and their occupation. Description of the property, the valuation or assessment costs of the property, dimensions, and may have a brief description of the property as well. To start, ward maps. These can help illustrate the dividing areas in the Marrickville suburb. Upon the proclamation of the municipality, the area was not divided into wards, and it was not until the Municipalities Act of 1867 and Marrickville's population exceeding 1,000 that it was divided into wards, including Stanmore, Middle Ward, and Cooks River Ward. In 1888, as it exceeded 4,000 in population, further wards were created, with the addition of renaming. Marrickville now made up North, South, East, and West wards. This naming structure maintained itself until 1949, as well as the 1977 ward map. During this, the amalgamation of Marrickville had 7 wards, including the wards of Petersham, St. Peters, as well as Stanmore, Dulwich Hill, Riverside, Henson, East Marrickville, following the addition of City of Sydney and present-day Newtown and Camperdown, and an 8th ward, Enmore Ward, was created. The next useful resource is valuation books. These record the basic information about a property. The information generally includes the owner and occupier, description of the property, i.e. house, land, shop, and the unimproved capital value and improved capital and assessed value. Like the rate books, valuation books prior to 1908 are missing many volumes. Until 1908, the valuation books and rate books share most of the same information and are mostly interchangeable. Street numbers are introduced in 1903 in the North and South Ward books. Starting from 1908, the valuation books were compiled triannually. The valuation books between 1908 and 1925 are consistent in format and typically contain the information listed above. Lot numbers and land dimensions are also mostly recorded. Entries are ordered by ward and then in alphabetical street order. The 1911 and 1913, as well as the 1923 and 1925 valuation books, are missing the North Ward entries. Valuation books cover 1895 to 1925 and are sectioned in different wards. These wards' pre-1910 documents are the Stanmore, Middle and Cooks River ward. From 1910, they turn into North, South, East and West ward. As you can see from this 1895 valuation books, the properties are sorted then by street and in early documents not by house numbers, but by lots and sections. These are in non-alphabetical order. By the 1914 books, the streets are now organised alphabetically with the inclusion of the house numbers and names with both owners and occupiers listed. Once you get to the end of the valuation records in 1925, it is then where you look at the valuation lists. Valuation books are great because they contain information on what sits on the land. They can also contain those house names, so if you're looking for that information, it's a great place to start. They can contain subdivision information which can aid in further research, and even land title information. So they can be a really great shortcut to find information quickly and fairly easy to use. This is why we suggest starting with these books instead of the rate books. Rate books can be used in tandem with the other information. These start around 1886, 10 years earlier than the valuation books, again sectioned by wards. In the early documents, there are no house numbers or names, so a way to easily track which house is the correct one as you go through the years is by following the owners' names. The rate books prior to 1886 are lost in full. Additionally, the rate books between 1887 and 1895 are lost, with the surviving rate books only between 1896 to 1907, with large gaps within them. These cover land and ownership, as rate books vary over time, but in 1907 they generally include the occupier and owner with basic property descriptions. Only notable change being introduced is the street numbers from the 1905 rate books. Entries are ordered by ward and then by alphabetical street order. The unimproved capital value refers to the value of the land, and the improved capital value means the value of the improvements in which the land had changed. A piece of land with a building on it should have an improved capital value much higher than the unimproved capital value. As you can see from the images here, these are examples of what the rate books look like, written in cursive and sometimes can be difficult to read. But you can see that the house names are included as well as the names of owners. Prior to 1923, Marrickville Council undertook land valuations. Land valuation information between 1872 and 1907 is recorded in the rate books, and from 1908 to 1924 in the valuation books. A handful of pre-1908 valuation books are kept separately to the rate books. But in 1949, Petersham and St. Peter's Council were amalgamated into Marrickville Council, and these valuation books contain entries for the land in these council areas from this point. The next resource is valuation list books. These were established in 1916 in order to access land values. Marrickville Council adopted the Land Act in 1916, and in 1923 the valuation list books were then published on a tri-annual basis. Numerous books are missing, but each ward has got multiple years with the full set, and from 1937 and 1939 all the books of all the wards have survived. These cover from the 20s until the late 1960s in some ward areas. In 1967, parts of Camperdown, Newtown and Enmore moved to the Marrickville Council with the valuation list series, originally maintained by the City of Sydney, were given to Marrickville Council. Here are examples of what these valuation lists look like. Many of these documents help you show the wards, the date, street name, change of owners, new owners, and their address, house name, the estate name, the type of building, the lot number and development plan numbers, dimensions, unimproved and improved value. All these details can provide a very clear picture of the house. The wards also operate the same, and streets are alphabetically sorted. Marrickville records also hold building registers. These are written solely in chronological order of when a property was built, but also when additions are made, such as adding a garage. The information recorded includes the names of the owner and builder, descriptions of the build, such as a new cottage, garage, or additions, the date the council received the plans, the street and road name. However, the street name of the building is sometimes not included. Subdivision information such as estate name, lot number, section, and the frontage and depth of the land is also sometimes included. Here is an example of the building registers for the Marrickville records. Subdivision plans are part of the early mapping and advertising of lots up for sale in Sydney. These contain the estate names, which are also on the valuation lists, the size of the lots, lot numbers, and the dates and locations of the auction. It can also show the surrounding areas that already have houses, churches, or important landmarks built. This can assist in confirming build dates for the house, and we have a selection of these subdivisions searchable on the catalogue, as well as you can find coloured versions available and downloadable on the State Library New South Wales website. Waterboard plans. These Marrickville waterboard plans are sheets produced by the Metropolitan Water Board from 1880s to 1890s. For house histories, they are of value because they can show diagrams of street blocks and accurate outlines of buildings. So you can use them to quickly identify if the building has been built at a certain time frame, including additions and alterations. Marrickville Residential Survey. These surveys cover each property in the Marrickville Council area, divided into various wards. They can detail the material and design on the property, measurements, and the condition. This can be useful in indicating any renovation changes from the original to the 80s, as well as the 80s till now. Here are a selection of helpful hints and issues that you can come across in the process of researching. If your property has or previously had 2 street frontages, it may be listed under the other street name, so it is always important to check. House numbers don't always appear in early rate books. Street names may have changed as well over time, so it is always good to double check through maps and subdivision plans if the street still remains under that name. If there is a jump in rates between one year and the next, this is often a sign that a house may have been built on the property. It may be the year your house was actually built. It may also indicate if major renovations occurred. It is also useful to record the owners and occupiers of houses on either side of the property when going back into the records. An example of a street that has undergone a name change is one in the Petersham area, where Yule Street was changed to Coruna Road. We are able to trace this through following the same owner names, as well as the ward maps and subdivision plans which have an alternative street recorded on it. This is how you are able to indicate if something had changed on the street over time. As you can see from the images to the right, by 1932 the road had changed, as compared to the 1927 valuation list. As our records tend to extend only to the 1940s, with the exception of the valuation list to the 60s, any modern records from these dates can be requested to Council as GIPA requests. These development and building application records can relate to your house and tell you more modern, up-to-date information. As part of house history research, it is also key to look at external sites that also provide important information. So in addition to those resources, there are some important sources available on the internet that can further help your house history research. The first includes the Sydney Sands directories. These are available in multiple locations. On our local notes page, you can find Balmain, Rozelle, as well as a few other suburbs. For suburbs such as Marrickville, these can be found on the City of Sydney archives, and these can usually show the renters, sometimes job titles, throughout the different years of a certain property. Trove is also a good resource. This can be mainly used to find other information about the owners or the occupiers, if you want to learn their stories of living in that property. Another useful external tool is a website called 6Maps. It operates similar to Google Maps, but shows a 1940s image of Sydney. These aerial views can be key, as well as showing differences and alterations made, and how the general suburb or street looked. On Historic Land Record Viewer, this is key in old properties that have original land titles. By using the volume and fole numbers, you can go further and further back into the original certificate titles. Probate packages and deceased estate files. These are searchable by name and can provide detail on the person and the house interior or what a property looked like in a certain decade, including an inventory of assets of someone's estate, with detailed record of each room in someone's house. So if this is a family member who lived at the property or looking to see what a decade looked like at this house, these can provide some interesting history. These follow from the years 1817 to 1976 in New South Wales and are viewable in person at the State Archives. Now, following this information overview, we are going to step by step show you 2 examples of house histories that have been conducted from public inquiries by our team. The first step is getting to Inner West Archives. There is a few different methods of doing so. You can search Inner West Council Libraries on Google or Inner West Council and click the top result. Now that we've clicked through to this page, you scroll down until you find to search for the catalogue. Click this link to get to our archives. Items in the Council archives can be searched for. This involves changing the drop-down menu and then entering your search term. So if you know you only need the 1907 rate book, you can do so by searching at the top and clicking the appropriate record, but sometimes there is issues with that. To use the first example, on the catalogue homepage, if you click Council Archives, you'll be taken to this section. There is a list of 9 catalogue records for each of the 9 former local councils that are now all part of the Inner West. You won't spend too much time on the others, as we are looking into Marrickville. This is the homepage of the Marrickville records, or the FONS as we call it. I'll quickly show you how to use some of the features here. Firstly, if you want to share a link with someone or save it into bookmarks or use it in citations, you can't use the URL in the bar at the top, as this link expires. To save and share links, scroll down to the bookmarks link and click that hyperlink to save and share. The ward maps can be seen under Marrickville Council wards, and these can also be found on this side tab on the front page. Once you are there are 3 maps, starting from the earliest. For this address, we are looking at South Street, and in the 1800s maps, it is not visible. But by the 1910 ward map, this street is now formed and is part of West Ward. Now that we have this information, we can head to the valuation lists. Through heading back to the Marrickville folder, depending on the type of history you are looking for, whether that's all the individuals who own the house, you can start with the latest record in 1963. If you specifically want to know the age of your house, I would recommend starting in the 1926 file. Once we click through these files, they are named by ward and alphabetical street names. Following this, we will look toward the West Ward towards the end of the alphabet. As you can see, the document does load in our web browser, but depending on your internet access and device, that can be difficult to load. So in order to view the PDF, you click into Location and click Access Resource. This then becomes a downloaded file, which is easier to navigate. You can see from this valuation list, you can see the estate name with the property house Wentworth. Noting down this information, you can move next onto the valuation books. We will then head to 1923 to 1925 valuation book. This should be a direct extension of the lists, and so hopefully carrying the same owner's name, as other identifiers such as house numbers or names might not be recorded. These documents can be harder to read as they are handwritten. These most of the time are in alphabetical and contains all wards in one document. At the top left corner, find the ward and then go down to South Street. On the document you can see those streets as you scroll. They also follow deeper descriptions of the street, such as South Street East Side, which can further help you geographically locate in the documents. Here we clearly see Sophia's name with the same house number, number 20, lot 27. It now can also show that it is being rented out, but also shows she owns the property next door and live there. We can now continue to look at earlier, older documents until we see a change in the owner, or once the property is not mentioned, then we can start to establish a build date. The rate books are also organised by ward and street order, geographically, but sometimes not always alphabetically. As we go into the 1910 documents, and further back into the 1909 documents, we clearly see that this house property is not recorded. We can see her property next door, which she lived and owned in, is there, as it is represented as an older property, but the Wentworth estate is not present. This gives us a general idea that the build date is between 1909 and 1910. With all this information, this can now tell a story of this house. This property can be found in the West Ward documents. Part of this estate, it is an Edwardian-style house, and the earliest mention of this house is in the 1912 rate books under Lot 27. In the later records, it also appears that in 1940 it was also owned by another man named Henry, and in the 1950s, Cecil and Alice Murray, in our last record in 1964. By looking at Trove, you can discover more of this history, as Cecil's job is described as storeman. This is further described in the residential survey for the Marrickville homes in the 1980s, which you can see here in the property materials and descriptions done. If we head over to the New South Wales Land Registry for those original certificates of title, find under Attribute Search and Vol Fol. The numbers here are the numbers associated with 20th South Street, Marrickville, and these can be copied straight into the search bar. By clicking on this icon here, you can then view these documents. You might see the similar owners that appear on our valuation and rate documents, and as we go further back in these numbers, these go all the way back to the original landowners. The next example are houses in the Stanmore-Petersham area. This is a property that the street name has changed and appears differently in the records. As mentioned previously, the Corona Road in Petersham. In order to find a changed street name, this can happen when you're tracking a house history and find a dead end in the street names. A quick way to navigate if something has changed is via the ward maps or subdivision plans. As most were done in the 1880s, it can illustrate that at one point the street was under one name. Not only can the name change, but also the numbers. As more houses are added to streets, they can be renumbered. This can sometimes appear as crossed out numbers on the records. This property is an example of how difficult finding a house can be. This property is on the Annandale ward and is part of the Wardaleville estate in Petersham records. This house before the 1930s was number 91 Ewell Street, section 5, lot 8. It is clearly shown in the 1920s valuation lists that Dora and Andrew Crawford lived and owned the house. This is under the Ewell Street. It is by the next 1932 valuation lists that the same owners are mentioned, but it is now under a new number and a new street. And on the subdivision sale advertisement maps, it goes up for sale in 1883 and appears in the rate books as a house as early as 1884, making that around the build date. So that has been a demonstration of our council archives. If you would like any further information on how to research your house or family, we carry guides as well as other videos on Ashfield and Balmain that you can find on our page. I hope it's been interesting and you have learnt some key skills in researching. If you have any issues, questions, you can contact the history team via our email here or the Inner West Libraries at this number.